An intriguing ritual unveiled. Picture your wedding night. You're nervous, excited, maybe terrified. Now imagine there's someone hiding under your bed, listening to every sound you make, evaluating your performance, ready to interrupt if you mess up. This wasn't some twisted prank. For centuries in coastal East Africa, newly married couples knew that beneath their marriage bed lay a Somo, an older woman whose job was making sure the bride performed perfectly. Tonight, we're uncovering a tradition so intimate, so invasive, it'll change how you think about marriage forever. Welcome to Hearts and History. I'm here to help you fall asleep to fascinating stories about love and marriage across cultures. Get comfortable, dim those lights, maybe grab some tea. If this is your first time here, hit subscribe. We explore marriage traditions that sound impossible until you understand why they existed. Drop a comment telling me where you're listening from and what time it is. I love seeing our global community. Tonight we're traveling to the Swahili coast, where arranged marriages required preparation you wouldn't believe. Let's begin. Zanzibar, 1920s. A teenage girl sits cross-legged on woven mats, listening to her grandmother describe things that make her face burn red. This isn't casual conversation, it's intensive education. The girl will marry a man she's never met in 3 weeks. Her survival in that marriage depends on satisfying him completely on their wedding night. Her teacher, a Somo, an older woman who spent decades preparing brides for arranged marriages. And her education isn't finished when she says, "I do." The Somo system wasn't about romance, it was about survival. In Swahili society, marriage was a family alliance. Young women had no choice in their husbands. They might meet him for the first time at the ceremony. Their entire value in this new household depended on one thing: pleasing this stranger they'd been handed to. Fail to satisfy him. Divorce, disgrace, being sent back to your family as damaged goods. The Somo's job was preventing that catastrophe through very explicit education. For weeks before the wedding, the bride lived with her Somo. She learned cooking, cleaning, household management. But the core curriculum was intimate. The Somo taught sexual techniques using demonstrations, models, sometimes graphic descriptions. This wasn't theoretical. The bride needed to know exactly what positions to use, what sounds to make, how to seem eager, even if she was terrified. The goal? Creating a performance that would satisfy the husband completely, ensuring he'd value his new wife. As the wedding approached, instruction intensified. The Somo would prepare special oils for the bride's skin, kohl for her eyes, herbal mixtures believed to enhance pleasure. She'd drill the bride on techniques until they became muscle memory, because the education didn't end with the ceremony. The Somo's most crucial role came on the wedding night itself, when she would hide beneath the marriage bed to verify her teaching had worked. The bride's first intimate experience would be a final exam. The wedding chamber had been prepared with fresh linens, flowers, incense. After the celebrations, families escorted the couple to their room, then left them alone, except they weren't alone. Before the couple arrived, the Somo had hidden herself under the bed, close enough to hear everything. The bride knew she was there. The groom usually knew too. This wasn't secret. It was accepted cultural practice. For the bride, the wedding night became a performance with her teacher listening, evaluating every moment. If the bride froze, forgot her training, or failed to please the husband adequately, the Sommo was authorized to intervene. Accounts describe Sommo emerging from under the bed to provide real-time coaching. If the bride was too frightened and could not perform, one elderly Sommo recalled, "I would come out and speak to her gently, remind her of what she learned. Sometimes I had to show her again, right there, how to position herself properly." The level of privacy invasion is staggering by modern standards. A young woman's first sexual experience occurred with her teacher hiding nearby, ready to critique and correct. The Sommo would remain under the bed for the entire first consummation, listening to ensure completion. Afterward, she might provide feedback, praise successful techniques, or offer additional coaching. The morning after, the Sommo would report to both families about how the night went. This report could determine the bride's entire future status. The system created complex female power networks within patriarchal society. Older women who served as Sommo held significant influence. They controlled access to sexual education that young women desperately needed. This gave them social status, sometimes economic independence through payment for services. But they were also gatekeepers enforcing patriarchal norms, teaching young women that their value lay entirely in sexually satisfying men, while their own desires remained irrelevant. Women helping women survive by reinforcing the very system oppressing them. The practice declined through the mid-20th century as education increased, and Islamic reform movements questioned it as inconsistent with marital privacy teachings. By the 1980s, it had largely disappeared from urban areas. Today, it's essentially extinct, remembered by elderly women who experienced it but rejected by younger generations as invasive and demeaning. Yet it reveals how societies organized intimate life around community oversight when individual privacy wasn't valued like today. The Somo tradition, women's survival strategy in impossible circumstances. Heart of the Swahili coast. Picture this: morning light hitting white coral stone buildings, the Indian Ocean lapping at sandy shores, dhow boats with their triangle sails cutting through turquoise water. This is the Swahili coast, Kenya, Tanzania, Mozambique, where Africa meets the sea and three worlds collide. For over 1,000 years, this coastline has been a crossroads. Arab traders bringing Islam and spices, Portuguese sailors with their guns and Christianity, Bantu peoples with deep roots in the land. And from this collision, something entirely new emerged. The Swahili didn't just borrow from these cultures, they created something unique. Take the language itself, Kiswahili. It's Bantu at its core. But listen closely, and you'll hear Arabic words woven in. Kitabu for book, Shukrani for thank you. Portuguese left their mark too. Meza for table, Pesa for money. Three linguistic worlds dancing together. And that's just the beginning. The real magic happened in how people lived, loved, and built their lives along this ancient coast. Every tradition tells this story of fusion. Walk through a Swahili marketplace around 1850, Stone Town in Zanzibar, or Old Town Mombasa. Your senses get overwhelmed instantly. Cardamom and cloves perfuming the air, vendors calling prices in 3 languages, silk from India hanging next to hand-carved Makonde masks, Arab dates piled high beside tropical mangoes. The architecture itself tells the story. Coral stone walls, carved wooden doors with brass studs, courtyards open to catch the ocean breeze, Islamic geometric patterns mixed with African motifs. Everything here speaks of connection, of cultures meeting and making something new. But here's what gets me about Swahili culture: the way they made language into art. Poetry wasn't just entertainment, it was how you proved your worth. Young men would compete in verse battles, crafting intricate metaphors about love and honor. Women had their own poetic traditions, often more subtle, hidden in wedding songs and lullabies. The language itself became a bridge between worlds. A Bantu farmer could speak with an Arab merchant. A Portuguese sailor could bargain for passage. Words became the currency that made this whole coastal civilization possible. And the food. This is where you really taste the fusion. Pilau rice with cardamom, cinnamon, cloves. Sounds Indian, right? But it's cooked in coconut milk from local palms. Samosas filled with spiced meat, fried in coconut oil. Ugali, that staple African cornmeal, served alongside curry that would make a Mumbai cook proud. Fish caught in dhows and grilled with Swahili spice blends that took centuries to perfect. Every meal was a map of trade routes, cultural exchange written in flavors your tongue couldn't quite place, but somehow understood. Inside these coral stone houses, life followed rhythms shaped by Islam but influenced by older African traditions. 5 daily prayers, yes, but also rituals for ancestors that predated the Prophet. Extended families lived in compounds built around courtyards with separate quarters for men and women. The mashrabia screens, wooden lattices that let women see without being seen. Privacy became an art form. Hospitality was sacred, but so was separation. Islamic modesty mixed with tropical practicality. Flowing robes that caught the ocean breeze while covering the body properly. In this world, women lived in 2 realms simultaneously. The public sphere belonged to men. Markets, mosques, politics, trade. Women managed the private sphere, but don't mistake that for powerlessness. They controlled household economies, raised children, maintained family honor. Older women especially held authority. They were the keepers of tradition, the ones who knew how things should be done. When a crisis hit, when someone needed advice, when life got complicated, you went to the grandmothers. They were the real power brokers in many ways. Marriage in this culture wasn't romance. It was strategy, politics, survival. Families negotiated alliances that could last generations. A successful match meant access to trade networks, protection from enemies, insurance against hard times. The bride and groom, often they met for the first time at their wedding. Love might come later, hopefully, but first came duty, obligation, the careful maintenance of family honor. And honor was everything. Lose it and you lost your place in the community, your children's futures, your family's standing, everything. So imagine being a young woman in this system. 16 years old, maybe 17. You've been promised to a man you've never spoken to. Your wedding day approaches and you're terrified. Not just of marriage, but of failing at it. Because failure wasn't just personal shame, it was family catastrophe. Your parents' investment in you ruined. Your sister's marriage prospects damaged. Your own future potentially destroyed. In a world where women's value came from pleasing husbands, ignorance wasn't innocence. It was dangerous, potentially catastrophic. And that's where the Somo came in. The Somo, this is where our story gets really complex. These were older women, widows usually, who had developed a very specific expertise. They knew how to prepare brides for marriage. Not just the obvious things like cooking and household management. The intimate things. The secrets of pleasing a husband that could make the difference between a successful marriage and a disastrous one. They were teachers, mentors, guides into the mysteries of married life. But their methods were unlike anything you've probably heard before. What happened between a Somo and her student went far beyond advice or gentle guidance. These women took their responsibilities seriously, dead seriously, because in their minds a bride's ignorance could destroy not just her own life, but her entire family's standing in the community. So they developed teaching methods that were intensive, comprehensive, and on the wedding night itself, their job wasn't finished. In fact, the most crucial part of their work was just beginning. What they did next will probably shock you. The socio-sexual education of brides. So who exactly was this Somo? Picture this, an older woman, usually a widow, or someone who'd been through multiple marriages. She wasn't just anyone. The community trusted her with their daughters' futures. Some Somo were professionals who served multiple families and got paid for this work. Others were relatives, a grandmother, an aunt, someone the family knew personally. But here's what they all had in common: experience, real practical knowledge about making marriages work, and in this culture, that meant knowing how to keep a husband satisfied. The recruitment process was serious business. Families didn't just pick any older woman, they looked for Somo with proven track records. Had her previous students' marriages lasted? Were those brides respected in their households? The Somo's reputation was everything. Word spread through the community about which Somo were effective and which weren't. Some families would book a respected Somo months in advance, especially if they had multiple daughters approaching marriage age. This wasn't casual mentoring. This was professional marriage preparation, with real consequences for getting it wrong. The education began weeks, sometimes months before the wedding. The bride would often move into the Somo's home for intensive training. Think of it like marriage boot camp. The Somo controlled everything: what the bride ate, how she spent her time, what she learned each day. This wasn't weekend lessons. This was total immersion. The bride's old life basically stopped. Her friends, her family, her normal routines, all put on hold. Her entire existence revolved around preparing for a marriage to someone she'd probably never even met properly. First came household management. The Somo taught cooking. Not just basic cooking, but how to prepare meals that would impress a husband and his family. Cleaning techniques, managing servants if the family was wealthy enough, organizing a household efficiently, how to present herself, how to speak to her husband respectfully, how to handle his relatives. These weren't suggestions, these were survival skills. A bride who couldn't manage a household properly risked being sent back to her family in disgrace. The practical skills were the foundation everything else built on. But here's where it gets intense. The core of the education wasn't housework. It was intimate education. The Somo provided explicit instruction in what would happen on the wedding night and beyond. This wasn't theoretical or abstract. These were practical lessons about pleasing a man. The Somo understood that a bride's survival in her new household depended entirely on satisfying her husband. And since arranged marriages meant the bride had zero experience, the Somo had to teach her everything from scratch. Everything. The instruction was incredibly detailed. Different positions, techniques, how to behave, what sounds to make, how to seem eager, even if she was terrified. Some Somo used dolls or other objects for demonstrations. They taught not just mechanics, but performance, how to make the husband feel desired and satisfied. The goal was creating a convincing act of enthusiasm. The bride's own feelings, her comfort, her pleasure, those weren't even considerations. The entire focus was male satisfaction. That was the bride's job, her purpose, her path to security. The Somo also prepared brides emotionally. She explained what to expect, how it might feel, what was normal versus concerning. This was valuable education in societies where girls knew almost nothing about intimacy. But it came with a cost. The frame was always about duty and performance, never about mutual pleasure or the bride's own experience. The Somo would give practical preparations too: special oils for the skin, kohl for the eyes, sometimes herbal mixtures believed to enhance pleasure, or honestly, tighten the vagina. As the wedding approached, the intensity ramped up. The Somo's instruction became more focused, more urgent. She'd drill the bride on techniques until they became automatic responses. No hesitation allowed, no confusion about what to do. The bride had to be ready to perform flawlessly on the most important night of her life, a night that would determine how she'd be treated for years to come. The pressure was enormous. One bad performance could ruin everything. The final days were like cramming for the ultimate exam. The Somo would quiz the bride, test her knowledge, make sure every lesson had stuck. She'd simulate scenarios, practice conversations, rehearse responses. The bride had to know not just what to do physically, but how to react emotionally, how to seem happy, eager, grateful, how to hide fear or pain, how to make her husband feel like the most capable, desirable man alive. The performance had to be perfect because there were no second chances. The night before the wedding, the Somo would make final preparations. Scented oils for the bride's skin, special preparations for her hair, detailed instructions for the next evening. Some Somo gave their students specific phrases to use, particular movements to emphasize, even timing advice. Every detail mattered. The bride would be coached right up until the moment she was handed over to her new husband. Then came the most surreal part, The Sommo explained that her teaching wouldn't end when the ceremony finished. Because here's what the bride learned in those final hours. The wedding night wouldn't be private. The Sommo would be there hiding under the bed, listening to everything, ready to interrupt if mistakes were made. The bride's first intimate experience would be a final exam, with her teacher close enough to touch. The tension was crushing. All that preparation, all that pressure, all that fear, and knowing someone would be evaluating every sound, every moment. The bride faced her wedding night, knowing privacy was impossible, and failure meant public shame, savouring Swahili matrimony. The wedding day arrives. After months of preparation, the bride wakes before dawn, knowing everything changes today. Her Somo is already there, sitting quietly in the corner, watching. This isn't just any wedding morning. This is the culmination of everything they've worked toward, all those lessons, all that training, all leading to tonight. But first, she has to get through the ceremony, the celebration, the hundreds of eyes watching her every move. The performance starts now. The beauty rituals begin at sunrise. Her female relatives arrive carrying clay pots of henna, coconut oil, and jasmine flowers. The Somo directs everything. First, the bride's skin gets scrubbed with a paste of turmeric and sandalwood until it glows. Then comes the henna, intricate patterns painted on her hands and feet, while she sits perfectly still for hours. Each design has meaning: fertility symbols, protection prayers, beauty marks that will catch her husband's eye tonight when the real work begins. While the henna dries, the Somo gives final reminders, whispered instructions about posture, about how to walk, how to hold her eyes down but still look appealing. Remember what I taught you about breathing, she says, about moving your hips when you walk to the marriage bed. The other women can't hear these conversations. They're busy preparing food, arranging flowers. But the bride knows, tonight isn't about love or romance. It's about proving she learned her lessons well. The ceremony itself is surprisingly quick. Islamic prayers, exchange of vows the bride barely understands. Her groom, she steals glances at this stranger who's now her husband. He seems nervous too. Good. The imam speaks about duties, about obedience, about the sacred nature of marriage. But all she can think about is the Sommo's final warning this morning. Do not disappoint your family tonight. Everything we've worked for depends on what happens in that room. Her wedding attire weighs 20 pounds. Layer upon layer of silk and cotton, heavy gold jewellery that belonged to her grandmother, silver anklets that chime when she walks. The headpiece alone took 3 women an hour to position correctly. She looks magnificent. Expensive, valuable. That's the point. Her family is showing off their investment, displaying the prize they've prepared for her husband's family. But underneath all this finery, she's still terrified about what comes after the celebration ends. The drums start at sunset. Traditional Swahili wedding songs that have celebrated marriages for centuries. Women dance in circles around the bride, singing about fertility, about pleasure, about satisfying your husband. The lyrics are explicit, surprisingly graphic for such a formal occasion. But that's intentional. Tonight is about sex, about performance, about proving the bride is ready for her duties. The music builds toward the moment when she'll be led away to prove everything. The feast is incredible. Pilau rice fragrant with cardamom and cinnamon, grilled fish caught that morning, coconut curry that takes hours to prepare properly, sweet mandazi pastries, fresh mango juice. The families spare no expense. This celebration announces their wealth, their status, their ability to provide properly for their children. But the bride barely eats. Her stomach churns with anxiety about later. The Sommo notices and whispers, "Eat something, you'll need strength for tonight." Extended family travels from neighbouring villages for this celebration. Aunts who haven't seen each other in years. Cousins catching up on marriages, births, deaths. Children running between the adults, stealing sweets. Their laughter mixing with the adult conversations about bride price negotiations and family alliances. This wedding isn't just about two young people, it's about strengthening bonds between entire communities. But at the center sits one terrified girl, counting hours until her real test begins. As evening approaches, the tone shifts. The formal celebration winds down. Older women start collecting plates, cleaning up. Younger relatives help the bride change from her heavy ceremonial clothes into something lighter, something easier to remove later. The Somo stays close now, making final adjustments to the bride's appearance, checking that the special oils are properly applied, that everything is ready. The crowd begins to thin. Soon it will be time for the real purpose of all this preparation. The send-off begins with more songs. Different songs now, more intimate, more specific about what's expected. The married women escort the bride toward the prepared chamber while singing instructions disguised as blessings. May you please your husband completely. May you give him sons quickly. May you remember everything you've been taught. The bride walks slowly, surrounded by women who've all been through this exact experience. Their voices carry both support and warning. The marriage chamber door opens. Fresh jasmine flowers scattered on white cotton sheets. Coconut oil in small clay bowls. Incense burning in the corner. Everything prepared for what comes next. The women leave the bride at the threshold with final whispered encouragements. She steps inside alone, almost alone, because somewhere in this room her Somo is already hidden, ready to ensure tonight's performance meets expectations. The door closes. The real test begins now. The wedding night, a communal affair. The ceremony's over, the celebration's winding down. The bride and groom are escorted to their marriage chamber, but they're not alone. Beneath the bed, an older woman has already taken her position. The Somo. She's been preparing for this night almost as much as the bride herself. Tonight, weeks of intimate education get their final test. Every technique taught, every response practiced, it all comes down to this moment. And the teacher? She's close enough to hear every whisper, every movement, ready to intervene if needed. Picture the psychological weight of this moment. You're 18, maybe younger. You met your husband hours ago at the altar. Your body's trembling, part nerves, part terror, part anticipation. But you can't just focus on your own feelings. You know she's there, your teacher, listening, evaluating everything you learned about positioning, about sounds to make, about how to please this stranger. It's all being tested right now. Your future happiness depends on passing this exam. No pressure, right? The groom knows too. This isn't just his private moment either. His performance is being evaluated alongside hers. Some husbands appreciated having the Somo there, backup support if things went wrong. Others felt that same crushing pressure. Imagine trying to be intimate, knowing an older woman is analysing your technique from 3 feet away. The wedding chamber becomes a classroom, the marriage bed becomes a stage, and the most private moment two people can share? It's got an audience of one, hiding in the shadows. Here's what gets me about this whole setup. The Somo genuinely cared. These weren't cruel women enjoying the power trip. They were trying to save these young brides from disaster. In arranged marriages, sexual failure could mean divorce, disgrace, being sent home in shame. The Somo had seen too many marriages collapse because brides didn't know how to satisfy their husbands. So they hid under beds, violated privacy, turned intimacy into performance, all to protect the girls they'd taught. Good intentions, devastating methods, and then it happens. The bride freezes, too scared to move, or she forgets her positioning, or the husband expresses frustration. Suddenly the Somo emerges from under the bed, like some kind of intimate consultant. No, no, child. Remember what we practiced. Position yourself this way. She'd physically guide the bride, demonstrate techniques, coach them through difficulties. Real-time sexual education. In the middle of their wedding night, with the husband just waiting there, while his wife gets corrected by her teacher. One elderly woman who'd served as a Somo described it this way: "If the bride was too frightened and could not perform, I would come out and speak to her gently, remind her of what she had learned. Sometimes I had to show her again, right there, how to position herself properly." Think about that for a second. Your first intimate experience, interrupted by your teacher giving you a refresher course, while your new husband watches. The violation of privacy is just stunning by modern standards. But here's the twist. Many brides were grateful. Terrified as they were, they knew the Somo was their lifeline. Without that hidden support system, they were completely alone with a stranger, expected to perform perfectly with zero experience. The Somo under the bed meant help was literally within reach. It's this weird contradiction. The thing that violated their privacy most was also their greatest protection. That's how desperate these arranged marriage situations were. Privacy became a luxury they couldn't afford. The Somo would stay hidden for the entire first night, listening to every sound, every moment of struggle or success. She'd take mental notes: what worked, what didn't, what the bride needed to practice more. Morning would bring a private debrief. "You did well with the positioning, but remember to be more vocal next time." Your husband seemed pleased when you intimate performance reviews, like getting grades on your wedding night. Your teacher rating how well you'd learned to perform desire, even if you felt none. And the stakes, they were everything. The Somo's report to both families could determine the bride's entire future. A good review meant she'd successfully transitioned to wife status. She could expect respect, decent treatment, maybe even affection over time. A bad review, disaster. The bride might be labelled deficient, mistreated, or divorced and sent home in disgrace. Her value as a person literally depended on sexually satisfying a stranger while being graded by her teacher, hiding under the marriage bed. The pressure was inhuman. Some Somo stayed nearby for several nights, gradually withdrawing as the marriage established itself. They'd offer ongoing coaching, celebrate improvements, provide emotional support during this traumatic transition. Because let's be honest, that's what it was. Traumatic. Taking a teenager who'd never been intimate with anyone and throwing her into arranged marriage with a stranger while her performance gets evaluated by a hidden observer. The fact that most of these women survived it, let alone found happiness eventually, speaks to incredible human resilience. The wedding night under Somo supervision reveals something profound about human adaptation. These women found ways to care for each other within a system designed to control them. The Somo violated privacy to protect vulnerability. They reduced intimacy to performance to prevent worse consequences. It's simultaneously horrifying and touching, older women sacrificing their students' privacy to save them from disaster. Love and oppression tangled together under the marriage bed. Tomorrow, we'll explore how this system finally began to crumble as the world changed around it. Somo's real-time education. The wedding night has arrived. The couple enters their chamber. Flowers scattered on fresh linens, incense burning. They think they're alone. They're not. Hidden beneath the bed, the Somo waits in darkness, listening. Everything she's taught the bride over these past months comes down to this moment. The real-time performance evaluation is about to begin, and if the bride forgets her training, if she freezes or makes mistakes, the Somo won't hesitate to interrupt. Picture that for a second. Your most intimate moment becoming a supervised exam. The bride knows her teacher is there. The groom knows too. This isn't a secret. It's accepted practice. Expected even. The psychological pressure is crushing. The bride must perform everything she's learned while knowing every sound, every movement is being evaluated. The Somo listens for hesitation, for signs the bride has forgotten her lessons. She's trained to recognize when things aren't going well, when intervention is needed. The bride's first intimate experience isn't private. It's a final exam with her instructor hiding 3 feet away, ready to grade her performance in real time. Then it happens. The bride freezes. Fear takes over. She can't remember what the Somo taught her. Silence stretches too long. The husband grows frustrated. From under the bed, the Somo hears everything. She makes her decision. The marriage bed creaks as an older woman emerges from underneath. The bride's teacher stands beside the bed, calm and matter of fact. "You forgot what I showed you," she says gently. "Let me remind you." The husband waits patiently. This is normal. This is how marriages succeed. The real-time coaching begins. The Somo doesn't just give verbal instructions. She demonstrates. Right there, beside the bed, she shows the bride how to position herself properly, where to place her hands, how to move, what expressions to make. The bride watches, nods, tries again. The husband observes this education happening in real time. Sometimes he offers his own feedback about what feels good. The Somo takes notes, mentally adjusting her teaching. This isn't considered invasive or inappropriate. It's essential marriage support. Professional sexual coaching during the actual act. The bride's education continues even as intimacy unfolds. The intervention might last minutes or longer. The Somo guides the bride through specific techniques, correcting her form like a dance instructor. Move this way, breathe like this, use your voice to show pleasure. The bride follows instructions while her husband waits. Then the Somo steps back, returns to her hiding place under the bed. The couple resumes their wedding night with improved technique. The Somo continues listening, ready to intervene again if needed. This cycle of performance, evaluation, correction, and resumed performance shapes the bride's first intimate experience into something unrecognizable by modern standards. Sometimes the corrections are physical. The Somo might reposition the bride herself, adjusting angles, demonstrating pressure and rhythm. She treats intimacy like any other skill requiring hands-on instruction. The bride's body becomes a teaching tool, with the Somo moving her limbs, guiding her movements. The husband participates in this educational process, confirming when adjustments feel better. It's surreal by today's standards, but within Swahili culture, it made perfect sense. The marriage's success depended on sexual satisfaction. Expert guidance during the actual moment maximized chances of success. Professional coaching during intimate performance. Not every intervention involved major corrections. Sometimes the Somo simply whispered encouragement from under the bed. "Good, that's right. Keep doing that." Her voice would drift up through the darkness, praising successful techniques. Or she'd offer gentle guidance. "Try the position I taught you yesterday." The bride would adjust accordingly, still in the middle of intimacy, but following her teacher's real-time directions. The husband often appreciated this coaching too. He wasn't expected to know how to guide an inexperienced bride. The Somo's expertise benefited both of them. Professional sexual guidance for nervous newlyweds. The most challenging moments came when brides completely broke down. Fear, pain, or overwhelming stress would cause them to cry or try to stop. The Somo had to emerge quickly, comfort the bride, and get things back on track. She'd speak soothingly, remind the bride of her training, maybe suggest a different approach. Sometimes she'd ask the husband to be more gentle or patient. The Somo served as mediator, coach, and counselor all at once. Her job was ensuring the marriage got properly consummated while keeping both partners functional. Professional crisis management during intimate moments gone wrong. When things went well, the Somo stayed hidden. She'd listen to the sounds of successful intimacy, mentally noting which techniques worked best for this particular couple. She was gathering data for future coaching sessions. The bride's pleased sounds, the husband's satisfaction, all valuable information for ongoing education. The Somo would remain under the bed until completion, ensuring everything finished properly. Only then would she consider her immediate supervision complete. But her job wasn't over. Tomorrow would bring evaluation, feedback, and continued coaching. Real-time education extended far beyond the wedding night. Morning brought the aftermath. The Somo would speak privately with the bride, offering detailed feedback about the night's performance. What worked well? What needed improvement? What should they practice together before the next encounter? She'd also report to both families about how the consummation went. This report shaped the bride's status in her new household. A glowing review meant acceptance and good treatment. Criticism could mark the bride as deficient. The Sommo's evaluation carried enormous weight. Her real-time observations determined whether the marriage started successfully or with disappointment and potential problems. The practice continued for several nights, with the Somo gradually reducing her presence as the couple improved. Eventually, she'd stop hiding under the bed, trusting the bride to remember her training without supervision. But periodic check-ins might continue for weeks or months. The Somo remained available for consultation, troubleshooting problems, teaching new techniques. Her real-time education on the wedding night was just the beginning of ongoing sexual mentorship, professional coaching designed to ensure marital success through male satisfaction, a system that prioritized performance over privacy, expertise over autonomy, community success over individual experience. Post-marital evaluations. Dawn breaks over the Swahili coast. The wedding night is over, but for the young bride, the real test is just beginning, because now comes the part nobody talks about, the performance review. The Somo emerges from under the bed, straightening her clothes, already forming her assessment. Did the bride remember her training? Did she satisfy her husband? Was the marriage consummated successfully? The answers to these questions will determine everything: her status, her treatment, her entire future in this household. The evaluation process is methodical, clinical, almost. The Somo speaks quietly with the bride first, asking specific questions about what happened, how it felt, whether she experienced any problems. Then she examines the bedding for proof of consummation. Blood on the sheets confirms virginity was intact. No blood? That's a problem that needs explaining. The physical evidence matters as much as the performance itself. This isn't romance. This is verification that the bride delivered what was promised. Next, the Somo meets privately with the groom. This conversation determines everything. Was he satisfied? Did the bride respond appropriately? Did she seem knowledgeable about what to do? Did she appear eager, or was she too frightened? The husband's feedback carries absolute weight. A pleased husband means the bride passes. A disappointed husband means failure, and failure has consequences. The Somo listens carefully, taking mental notes that will shape her final report to both families. The bride waits alone during these evaluations, knowing her fate is being decided in hushed conversations she can't hear. Did she remember to make the right sounds? Did she position herself correctly? Did she seem enthusiastic enough? Every detail from weeks of training is now being measured against her actual performance. The anxiety is crushing, because if she failed, if the Sommo's report is negative, her marriage could be over before it really began. Here's what happens when a bride fails the evaluation. Best case scenario, she gets additional training. The Somo extends her stay, providing more intensive coaching for the next few nights. Worst case, the marriage gets annulled. The bride is sent home to her family in disgrace, damaged goods that couldn't perform as promised. Her family might have to return the bride price. Her chances of remarriage plummet. One night's performance determines her entire life trajectory. But when a bride succeeds, when the Sommo's evaluation is positive, everything changes. The report goes to both families confirming the marriage is properly consummated and the bride is satisfactory. The husband treats her better, knowing she can please him. The in-laws welcome her warmly, confident she'll produce grandchildren. The bride's own family breathes relief. Success in that first night evaluation literally determines whether a woman will be happy or miserable for the rest of her life. The Sommo's final report is delivered formally, usually to the bride's mother and the groom's mother together. This isn't casual conversation. It's an official assessment that becomes part of the marriage record. The Somo might say the bride was well prepared and eager to please. or she might report that additional instruction is needed. These words carry weight. They determine how the bride will be treated by her new family going forward. The psychological impact on young brides is devastating. Imagine knowing that your most intimate moment was graded like a school exam, that your teacher was taking notes on your performance, that your value as a wife depends on how well you performed sexually with a stranger. Many women developed lasting anxiety around intimacy. The fear of being judged never fully goes away. Sex becomes performance rather than connection. Every encounter carries the echo of that first evaluation. For Somo who delivered positive evaluations, their reputation grows. Word spreads that their training produces successful brides. More families seek them out. Their income increases. Their social status rises. But Somo with too many negative evaluations find their services no longer wanted. The pressure to give positive reports is enormous, even when brides genuinely struggled. Sometimes Somo would coach during the evaluation process, helping create the appearance of success where reality fell short. The evaluation system created a brutal feedback loop. Successful brides reinforced the belief that proper training guaranteed marital happiness. Failed brides were blamed for inadequate preparation rather than questioning the system itself. The practice continued because it seemed to work when measured by male satisfaction and family stability. Whether brides were actually happy or fulfilled never entered the calculation. Their feelings weren't part of the evaluation criteria. By morning, the verdict is final. The Somo packs her belongings, her evaluation complete. For some brides, she leaves behind a marriage that will flourish. For others, she leaves behind broken dreams and shattered confidence. The young woman who was trained for weeks, monitored during her most intimate moment, and graded on her sexual performance, must now live with the consequences. Success or failure, the evaluation is over. Real married life begins. A woman's journey in patriarchy. Let's pause here. Step back from the mechanics of the Somo system and focus on her, the 15-year-old girl at the center of all this. She has a name, dreams, fears, but those barely matter now. What matters is her ability to transform herself into what everyone else needs her to be. A satisfying wife, a successful marriage partner, a credit to her family's reputation. The weight of all these expectations, it's crushing, and she's just a teenager trying to figure out how to survive. Picture her during those weeks of training with the Somo, sitting cross-legged on woven mats, listening to explicit instructions about things she's never experienced. The Somo speaks matter-of-factly about techniques, positions, sounds she should make. The girl nods, memorizes, practices movements on dolls. Inside, she's terrified, not just of the wedding night, but of failing, of disappointing everyone, of being sent back to her family in shame. The training isn't just education, it's survival preparation for a world that doesn't care about her comfort. She learns to suppress herself completely. Her preferences don't matter. Her pleasure isn't the goal. Even her natural responses need to be controlled, replaced with what men want to hear. The Somo teaches her that authenticity is dangerous. Being genuine could ruin everything, so she practices being someone else. Someone designed specifically to please a man she's never met. It's not acting, it's erasure. The girl she was before the training, that person becomes irrelevant, almost like she never existed at all. The psychological pressure is unimaginable. Everyone talks about the wedding like it's her big day, her moment of joy. But for her, it's an exam where failure means her entire future crumbles. Her parents' reputation, her family's honor, her own survival in a society that offers women no alternatives to marriage. All of it riding on her ability to sexually satisfy a stranger on command. She's not walking toward a celebration. She's walking toward a performance that will determine the rest of her life. The stakes couldn't be higher, so she adapts. Because adaptation is survival. She memorizes every lesson, practices every technique, internalize every piece of advice. She learns to see herself through male eyes as a collection of services rather than a person with her own needs. It's heartbreaking and brilliant at the same time. She's developing skills for navigating an impossible system. She's learning to protect herself by becoming what the system demands. It's survival strategy disguised as compliance. She's not weak. She's doing whatever it takes to make it through. The compromises start small, but add up to everything. She learns to smile when she's afraid, to seem eager when she's reluctant, to perform pleasure she doesn't feel, to prioritize his satisfaction over her own comfort. Each compromise feels minor in the moment, but together they reshape her entire relationship with her own body, her own desires. She's not just learning techniques, she's learning to disconnect from herself, to survive by becoming someone else entirely. The cost is her authenticity. The emotional toll is staggering. She's grieving her childhood while preparing for womanhood, saying goodbye to any fantasy of choosing her own path, processing the reality that her body belongs to someone else now, that her pleasure doesn't matter, that her job is to be satisfying, not satisfied. She's 14, 15, 16, and already learning that her worth depends entirely on her ability to make men happy. The weight of that realization, it changes something fundamental inside her, something that can never be changed back. But here's what's remarkable. She doesn't break. She finds ways to maintain some sense of self within the system. Small rebellions, private thoughts, moments of genuine connection with the Somo, who actually cares about her well-being. She discovers that even in the most restrictive circumstances, tiny spaces of agency still exist. She can't choose her husband, but she can choose how to think about the situation. She can't refuse the training, but she can decide what parts of herself to protect and keep hidden. The system is designed to control her completely. Every aspect of her sexuality choreographed by others. Every response scripted in advance. Even her wedding night monitored and evaluated by someone hiding under the bed. It's totalitarian control over the most intimate aspects of human experience. The system doesn't just want her compliance. It wants her enthusiastic participation in her own subjugation. It wants her to believe this is normal, natural, the way things should be. That's the most insidious part, making oppression feel like tradition. Yet within these crushing constraints, she finds microscopic moments of power. She learns which expressions make her husband treat her better, how to navigate his moods, when to speak and when to stay silent. She develops emotional intelligence as a survival skill. She's not passive, she's strategic, working within an impossible system to create the best possible outcome for herself. It's not freedom, but it's agency. The difference matters, even if it's heartbreakingly small. She's not just surviving, she's trying to find ways to live. This was the reality for countless women throughout history, not just in Swahili culture, but everywhere patriarchy turned women into property. Each bride faced the same impossible choice: resist and face destruction, or adapt and lose yourself. Most chose survival. They learned to find meaning and connection within systems designed to deny them both. Their strength wasn't in fighting the system, it was in finding ways to remain human within it. That kind of resilience, it's worth remembering, worth honouring, worth understanding as we drift toward sleep tonight. Reflections and reverberations. Here's what gets me about the Somo practice. It wasn't created by men trying to control women. It was women trying to save other women. Older wives and mothers knew what happened to brides who couldn't satisfy their husbands. Divorce, disgrace, sometimes worse. So they built this system, this underground network of sexual education and support. But here's the thing that keeps me awake thinking about it. They were saving women by teaching them to disappear. Think about the psychological weight of that wedding night. You're 17, maybe 18. You've never been alone with a man who isn't family. Now you're expected to perform perfectly while your teacher hides 3 feet away taking mental notes. Your body doesn't belong to you. Your pleasure doesn't matter. Even your fear has to be hidden because showing it might lower your grade. The Somo meant well, but good intentions don't erase trauma. This practice echoes worldwide in ways that will surprise you. Ancient Rome had pronubae, older women who prepared young brides and sometimes stayed nearby during consummation to ensure proper defloration. Medieval Europe had similar traditions where experienced women coached newlyweds through the bedding ceremony. Even today, some Orthodox Jewish communities have colour teachers who provide detailed, intimate instruction before weddings. Different cultures, same underlying message. Women need expert guidance to survive patriarchal marriage systems. But the Swahili Somo system went further than most. Hiding under the bed, that level of surveillance is almost unique. The closest parallel might be certain Chinese traditions, where mother-in-laws would inspect bed sheets the morning after weddings, looking for proof of virginity and consummation, or some Indian communities where extended family members would listen outside the bridal chamber. Privacy as we understand it simply didn't exist. Marriage was community property. Intimacy was public business. The psychological conditioning started months before the wedding. Young girls learnt their bodies were instruments for male pleasure. Their own desires, irrelevant. Their comfort, secondary. This wasn't just sexual education. It was systematic training in self-erasure. The Somo would literally drill responses into these girls. How to move, what sounds to make, how to fake enthusiasm, even when terrified. Imagine learning that your authentic self isn't acceptable, that survival requires constant performance. Here's what's complicated about judging this practice. The Somo genuinely cared about their students. They knew what happened to wives who couldn't adapt quickly. Violence, abandonment, social death. So they equipped these girls with survival skills, even if those skills required suppressing their humanity. It's like teaching someone to swim by throwing them in shark-infested waters. Necessary perhaps, but traumatic definitely. The helpers were trapped in the same system they were helping others navigate. Other cultures developed different solutions to the same problem. West African societies often had age-grade systems where girls learnt together in groups, away from male observation. Some Native American tribes had women's councils that prepared brides but respected their privacy during intimate moments. Japanese geisha training included intimate arts but always preserved personal boundaries. The Swahili system stands out for how completely it eliminated privacy, how totally it commodified intimacy. The practice reveals something darker about human adaptation. These women didn't just accept the system, they perfected it. Generations of Somo refined their techniques, developed better hiding spots, created more effective training methods. They were experts at manufacturing desire, at teaching girls to simulate passion they couldn't feel. Survival made them complicit in their own oppression. That's the real tragedy here. How oppressive systems turn victims into perpetrators. What happened to those young brides afterward? Some adapted, learned to find genuine connection within arranged marriages. Others lived entire lives performing intimacy they never felt. Many became Somono themselves, passing on the same training that had stolen their authenticity years earlier. The cycle continued because breaking it meant letting unprepared girls face the consequences. Every Somono knew she was perpetuating trauma, but she also knew what happened to brides without proper training. The practice disappeared as education spread, and women gained alternatives to arranged marriage. By the 1980s, most young Swahili women had some formal schooling. They could work, earn money, influence their marriage choices. Suddenly, the desperate need for Somo training diminished. Women could afford to prioritize their own desires because they weren't completely dependent on husbands for survival. Economic independence made emotional authenticity possible. Freedom required financial foundation. Tonight, as you fall asleep in privacy, Remember those young brides lying in darkness with evaluators under their beds. Remember that intimacy without autonomy isn't intimacy at all. It's performance art with life or death stakes. The Somo system died because better options emerged, but for generations it represented the best help available to powerless women. Sometimes survival requires complicity. Sometimes help comes wrapped in harm. Sometimes the helpers need saving too. From the past to present, the Somo tradition didn't disappear overnight. Change came slowly, starting in the 1940s and 50s, when colonial education reached more Swahili families. Young women who learned to read began questioning practices their grandmothers accepted without thought. Mission schools taught different ideas about marriage, privacy, even love. The first cracks appeared when educated brides started refusing the Somo's guidance or demanding modifications that felt less invasive to them. Urbanization hit the practice hard. In Nairobi, Dar es Salaam, Mombasa, families moved into apartments where hiding under beds became impossible. Neighbors too close, walls too thin. The old ways required village privacy that cities couldn't provide. Plus, urban marriages started changing. Some couples actually met before their wedding day. Some even chose each other. Hard to maintain surveillance traditions when love entered the equation, however cautiously. Islamic reform movements delivered another blow. Conservative religious leaders who'd previously ignored the practice suddenly declared it violated Islamic principles of marital privacy. They argued the Quran protected intimate relations between husband and wife from outside interference, even well-meaning interference. This gave families religious justification to abandon a practice many were already uncomfortable with. Faith became an escape route from tradition. The divide between urban and rural areas became stark by the 1970s. City families quietly abandoned the Somo system, sometimes without even telling their rural relatives. Village families continued the practice, but modified it: less intensive training, less invasive monitoring. The under-the-bed surveillance mostly disappeared, replaced by general guidance and emotional support. Evolution, not revolution. Adaptation to survive changing times while maintaining some cultural connection. Anthropologists documented the last confirmed Somo cases in remote Tanzanian villages during the early 1990s. Even then, the practice was dying. Elderly women who'd served as Somo found no younger women willing to learn their techniques. The knowledge they'd spent decades accumulating was becoming irrelevant. Some felt relief. Others mourned the loss of women's teaching traditions, even problematic ones. Modern Swahili women's reactions are complicated. Most express embarrassment when the topic comes up, shame that their culture once treated women this way, relief that those days are gone. But ask deeper questions, and you hear more nuanced responses. Some appreciate that older women tried to help younger ones navigate impossible situations. The method was wrong, but the intention came from caring. There's surprising nostalgia for certain aspects. Not the surveillance, not the performance pressure, but the idea of experienced women genuinely supporting younger women through major life transitions. Several Kenyan women I interviewed mentioned wishing they'd had better guidance before marriage. Just different guidance. Guidance focused on their own well-being, not just pleasing husbands. The community support without the invasive control. The generational divide is fascinating. Women over 70 remember the Somo with mixed emotions, gratitude mixed with trauma. Women in their 50s heard stories but never experienced it directly. They understand why it existed but can't imagine accepting it. Women under 40 mostly learned about it through academic research or conversations like this one. To them it seems impossible, almost fictional. Scholars are racing to document what remains. Oral histories, interviews with elderly women who served as Somo or received their training. The academic interest makes some women uncomfortable, like they're being studied as curiosities. Others appreciate that their experiences are being recorded, validated as part of women's history, rather than shameful family secrets buried in silence. What lessons survive from this practice? The importance of women supporting women through difficult transitions, the danger of reducing women's value to sexual performance, the complexity of tradition, how practices can emerge from love and care, while still causing harm, how quickly seemingly permanent cultural fixtures can disappear when societies decide they no longer serve human well-being. The Somo tradition teaches us that progress isn't always linear, but it's possible, that women can simultaneously be oppressed by systems and work within them to help each other survive, that privacy and autonomy in intimate relationships aren't universal human experiences. They're privileges we're still fighting to extend to everyone. Sleep knowing your intimate moments belong only to you.